Oh, okay. Thank you. Miss got it. Okay. Okay. Can you see me?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. My brother has just recently been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, and so I've come to stay with my sister and my sister-in-law and my brother until my brother passes away. And I'm helping to care for him and to teach him meditation and things like that. So I'm not at home. So in the background, you'll see my sister-in-law's office rather than my beautiful room where I live. And also as you know, my laptop has collapsed for the 4th time in the last year. So I'm using iPhone. So these are all conditions that I wasn't expecting, and I'm not sure whether anything unusual will happen. But there was a Chan master from Taiwan, Venerable, how can I have forgotten this monk's name? Oh, Dharma Drum. He set up Dharma Drum. Sheng Yen, Master Sheng Yen. And he had a lovely saying which said that the young people are not yet old people are not yet dead. Work with what you have and do not resist change. So tonight I'm working with what I have and I'm not resisting change. So if anything strange happens, we can take refuge in Master Sheng Yen's saying. So let's do a little bit of meditation. I'm not sure how much experience anybody's had, with the exception of a couple of people. So it'll be a guided meditation, and we will spend about 10 minutes. So what you need to do is, first of all, to sit in a comfortable position, either on the floor or in your chair, or however you sit when you meditate. And just relax into that position. Notice your feet, whether they're on the floor or with your legs are crossed. Be aware of that. Place one hand, your left hand, on top of your right hand. Palms up. Sit with your back straight, but not like a ramrod, just kind of gently straight, but not leaning back, otherwise you'll tend to sleep. Sit with your nose in line with your abdomen and tuck your chin in just a little. You can leave your eyes open or you can close them gently, whichever works for you best. So sitting there upright and relaxed, relax your shoulders particularly, and allow a very gentle smile to arise on your lips, just like the smile of the Buddha on the Buddha image. And if you smile in that way, you will notice that your facial muscles also relax. So as you're breathing, notice the breath as it enters through the nostrils and departs through the nostrils. Breathing in and breathing out. Keeping your attention on your in-breath and your out-breath. Remaining relaxed and at ease. Breathing in, breathing out. paying attention as best you can to your in-breath and your out-breath. When thoughts arise or feelings arise and you just notice them, let go and come back to your breathing without any judgment of yourself. Breathing in, breathing out, paying attention to your in-breath and your out-breath, coming to rest completely. Enjoying the stillness of the early evening. Breathing in, breathing out. Just allowing your attention to rest in the in-breath and the out-breath as you experience it entering and leaving your nostrils. And very gently bring your attention back into the room in which you're sitting. Notice the sounds in the room. Notice your body in contact with a chair or the floor or with itself. And when you're ready, you can gently open your eyes and stretch. And shake out the stiff bits of the body, if there are any. I apologise for the interruption. I forgot to move the car out of the driveway so that my sister-in-law could go and pick my brother up from the hospital. Okay. There we are. So, does anybody want to say anything about that experience of meditation? Maybe some of you don't meditate regularly or you haven't meditated before. I know that some of you are regular meditators. Please don't feel afraid to share your thoughts and your ideas.
Venerable, I noticed that like just in that meditation, the instruction to come out of the meditation is very gentle. Is that kind of sort of important for us sort of to come out, like to kind of come out of our meditations in a gentle way by becoming aware of our surroundings first before we open our
Do you
eyes,
think it's
etc.?
important? My question is, do you think it's important? Was it important for you?
Yes. I think sometimes if I come out too suddenly, it can be very disorientating.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so there's the answer to your question. Well, at least from my point of view, and I'm only one person, but from my point of view in Buddhism, there is a focus and emphasis on being gentle and kind to ourselves and to one another. So if we kind of rush out or jump out or whatever, then we're likely to experience a lot of discomfort and not enjoy the calm and the peace that we've generated. So I would rather you enjoy the calm and the peace that you've generated than to sort of jump to attention as if that were important in some way or other. Is that a sufficient answer to your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Anyone else with anything they'd like to say about that brief experience of mindful breathing?
So if you have any questions or comments, you can post it in the chat, or you can just unmute yourself and start speaking.
Perhaps if you want to put them in the chat, that's fine, and we can answer them later. But I have to say that yes, I can get. I'm not sure I can get chat on my iPhone, so you might need to share them with me. Okay. Oh no, there's 3. There's some questions already. Chat 3. Oh, those are Metta Centre announcements. Okay. So let's go now to the Dharma talk, the Dharma sharing. And we'll have the Dharma talk. If you've got questions along the way, I can't see everybody. Normally I'd say to put your hands together in this format, and then I can answer your question, but I can't see everyone. So perhaps if you hold your questions until the very end, it's always possible that what I'm going to say will answer the question anyway. Tonight I'm going to talk about something called the 5 Remembrances. In a number of monastic traditions within Buddhism, one practice on a daily basis is called the recitation of the 5 Remembrances. Now, I know that the 5 Remembrances are practiced in the Plum Village tradition, and they are also practiced in the Theravadan tradition. I'm not sure whether they're practiced in my own tradition. I've never been told that, but it couldn't hurt anyone to practice the 5 Remembrances. The 5 Remembrances are as follows. The 5 things to remember. 1, I am of the nature to grow old. There is no way to escape growing old. 2, I am of the nature to have ill health. There is no way to escape having ill health. 3, I am of the nature to die. There is no way to escape death. 4, All that is dear to me and everyone I love are of the nature to change. There is no way to escape from being separated from them. Fifthly, I inherit the results of my actions in body, speech, and mind. My actions are the ground on which I stand. So when these 5 remembrances are recollected, they have at least 3 functions. The first function is to remember that these realities in life, that each one is true of everybody's experience, including ours. The second function is to allow whatever feelings are associated or related to each reality to arise, to be recognized, and to be processed, so that when each reality does arise in our lives, they are not so difficult to experience. So we might reflect, say, on I am of the nature to die. There is no way to escape death. And there might be feelings of grief or sorrow or fear or something else that arises. And recollecting these particular remembrances allows for those feelings to arise in our hearts and minds. And once we have recognized those feelings are there, we can do something about them. We can do something about processing those feelings so that when the actual experience of death comes, we don't experience deaths in quite the difficult way that we might have done if we hadn't acknowledged its possibility. Thirdly, each remembrance enables us to look more deeply into our experience, into all the habit patterns that determine the character of our lives. So is your life characterized by the distaste for growing old? Is it characterized by the fear of death? Is it characterized by your avoidance or your hope to avoid ill health? When you go through these 5 remembrances, you can get in touch with your actual response to these realities of life. The 5 remembrances can either be spoken or chanted. I personally prefer to read them out loud rather than to chant them, because chanting really can divert my attention away from the reality that I'm trying to engage with, and I become more interested in the chant tone than I do in the reality I'm trying to face. So now I'm going to look more deeply into the meaning of the 5 remembrances, at least from my own point of view. In reality, it is important for each of us to look deeply into the meaning of each remembrance and come to our own individual conclusions about its meaning. So what Thich Thong Phap says doesn't have to be what you think. You have to look into them for yourself and come to your own conclusions. These are just my own personal points of view. I am of the nature to grow old. There is no way to escape growing old. Recently, I had my 70th birthday. I look forward to it, actually. For a start, I now feel that I'm a proper grown-up. Other people older than me can still think of me as a baby, but the reality is that 7 decades amounts to a long and, for me, a rich life. In that 70 years, I have earned an ordinary and a postgraduate degree. I've used both to obtain professional work over a 50-year period. In that time, I have worked as a nurse in childcare, teaching in junior primary, upper primary, secondary schools, and amongst adults. I've worked as a support worker and a human rights advocate with people labelled intellectually disabled. I've worked as a pastoral care worker and a chaplain. But my primary work now is as a Buddhist monk. Old age represents for me a rich and interesting life, which has also included the experience of love in a number of ways, an experience of travel, and the opportunity to live in a variety of cultural contexts. A long life which necessitates aging has given me richness and experience. With a long life comes many challenges. Buddhism refers to the painful challenges of life as dukkha, suffering or unsatisfactoriness. As I have aged, I have realized that these challenges, this dukkha, are not the enemy. They are, in fact, the means whereby we learn the lessons of our lives, the great lessons of our lives. Two approaches to the challenges we encounter over the long period of our lives are gratitude and forgiveness. We can cultivate gratitude for the lessons that the challenges provide us. I have even known forgiveness for the people whose hurt of me has precipitated that learning, whilst forgiveness of others and of myself has allowed for more open-heartedness. Some assume that old age is a bad thing, as it leads to sickness, death, and separation. I'm here to tell you that's not true. I don't assume that old age is a bad thing. As each of those things are inevitable, old age, sickness, and death, it seems sensible to me to make friends with these experiences. And we can start with making friends with the process of aging. Aging is not our enemy. Secondly, I am of the nature to have ill health. There is no way to escape having ill health. If this Buddhist tradition is right, if there is no way to escape having ill health, why bother trying to escape it? Why add anxiety and resistance to illness? I remember as a child being ill, often with a fever. It was an opportunity to rest at home, to be cared for deeply by my parents, to have Vegemite on Jatz biscuits, to drink lemonade and lie in bed listening to the wireless. The pain associated with illness is made better by the care of others, or it's made worse by loneliness or the unavailability of treatment. Much of the suffering of the ill without access to treatment is caused by poverty or war or both. The solution is to ensure worldwide that there is access to good health care, and to avoid violent conflict. The challenge to create a just and fair world is afforded to us throughout our lives as we cultivate a passion for justice and equity in the world. My brother has vascular dementia. It involves lots of pain, memory loss, and the disappointment that comes when his dreams or the things he assumed as part of his life, such as work, are no longer there. It is a constant challenge to him. He is often in pain or depressed and has even asked me to organise voluntary euthanasia for him. If I could restore him to complete health and give him back his old life, I would. But I can't. What I can do is to be a loving brother, to work with him in his garden, to take him out for lunch, to go to the dog park so that he can see my dogs Joey and Lucy run around with all the other dogs and he can talk to all the other people there. We can go to visit the area we grew up in, which is one street back from a Vietnamese temple now, to listen patiently to him and deeply to him and keep in very regular contact with him. My brother is cared for by a very loving wife who watches over him and is very protective of him. He lives in his own housing commission home and has paid support workers accompanying him every day of the week. He has a watchful GP and a caring psychologist. Much of what makes it difficult in his life is his own attitude to his dementia. I don't imagine for a moment that his illness is not a challenge, but in reality, his life is well supported and rich. And I know of a brother monk in Vietnam who had a stroke, as did my brother. He died due to the lack of resource in that country. And that's the issue, not illness, but the lack of care that might be available. I don't see ill health as the problem, so much as isolation, poverty, personal resistance, and unresolved emotional issues underlying the illness are the problem. These are the things that cause suffering, not the illness itself. And they can be made better by company, by adequate resources, by acceptance of the circumstances of our lives and the opportunity to work through the underlying emotional issues in life. A great opportunity to take charge of our lives. I am of the nature to die. There is no way to escape death. Yes, I am going to die. It's true. I've seen my grandparents, my parents, all of my aunts and uncles, and 3 of my cousins die. I've had friends die. All of my pets have died. In fact, it's not possible to live in the world and avoid the reality of death. The American poet Mary Oliver speaks beautifully to this in her poem called In Blackwater Woods. This is what she says. To live in this world, you must be able to do 3 things. To love what is mortal, to hold it against your bones, knowing your own life depends on it, and when the time comes to let it go, to let it go. In Zen, there is a saying, the cause of death is birth. So if you're going to decide to be born, you're going to have to put up with the other thing called death. No choice. What is it that makes us unwilling to face the reality of death? Why do we fear death? I suppose the simplest response to that question is our attachment to the idea that we are solid, permanent selves. And I see that all living beings, even bacteria, have that sense of being somehow solid or permanent, and they hold to that perception. The Buddha taught that all beings love their lives. So you might have seen photographs of when scientists come close to a bacterium with a pin or a needle. And what does the bacterium do? It doesn't just sit there and let itself be skewered by this pin. It runs away because it wants its life. It loves its life. But there are other things I've learned as well about death and dying. My father died in 1997 and I conducted his funeral. I didn't want some Christian minister in fancy clothes talking about my dad, a person he or she didn't even know. I wanted to offer my father that last service myself. My parents separated and divorced in the late 1960s, early 1970s. Their parting was bitter. When my dad died, my mother's sister, her brother-in-law, and their older 2 children came to my dad's funeral. I was very touched by that. After the funeral, I approached one of my cousins and thanked him for coming to my father's funeral. He said, "Why wouldn't I be here? Do you remember when I was young and learning the piano? No one showed any particular interest. I was learning a piece called Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, and your dad would come and stand next to me and sing with me. That gave me the confidence I needed to go on playing the piano. My cousin went on in life to become a creative man. Initially, he was a primary school teacher, but he began a publishing company, producing aids for children to learn and develop their reading skills. It became evident to me from what my cousin said about my father that my dad had a part to play in his ongoing creativity. My father's love for my cousin was present in what my cousin offered to new readers. And so the truth of who my dad was, his capacity for love, continued to live in the learning of many children, not to mention different ways in my life and in many other lives as well. Of course, his body and his running thoughts would come to an end, but his nature of love would continue. And his capacity to love came from somewhere else too, came from those who had shown their love to him back in time, his ancestors, my ancestors. As the Plum Village tradition suggests in one of its songs, if you know this song, please sing along with me. No coming, no going, no after and no before. I hold you close to me. I release you to be so free, because I am in you and you are in me. Because I am in you and you are in me. So what the teaching of Thich Nhat Hanh is saying there is that there's no such thing as death. There's no such thing as birth. There is just the continuation, mostly the continuation of love. Of course, I miss my dad in the following year after his death, his face, his voice, even his fingernails that were much bigger than mine. I remember thinking about them a lot. Those aspects of the 5 things that make up a living being, the 5 skandhas that made him up, I missed those things. But that was a lesson to me in itself about the need to let go of our attachments to all those elements that make up the beings we know and love. And my dad left behind him unwholesome elements too, that caused hurt in me, for example. But that gave me the opportunity for understanding the source of his unhappiness, his own suffering, and the opportunity that I had for forgiveness of him. There wasn't a lot of forgiveness to do because I just plain loved my dad anyway. But there were some things I needed to let go of. A year went by and I grew to accept that his time on planet Earth had come to an end, that I would always have reasons to love him, and in death I understood him much more than I had before. This experience was true of everyone I loved. I came to understand for myself that death is a natural outcome of life. As I get older, I grow more accepting of the reality that my life will come to an end, that death is any time now. Contentment with all that I have known is the goal. In Hobart, there is a haiku master called Ron Moss, whose following haiku means a great deal to me. Starry night, what's left of my life is enough. The next, remembrance, all that is dear to me and everyone I love are of the nature to change. There is no way to escape from being separated from them. One of the things in life that has become evident to me is expressed beautifully in the Hebrew scriptures, where it says, "For everything there is a season, and a time for every matter under heaven, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to pluck up what is planted, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to break down and a time to build up, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance, a time to cast away stones and a time to gather stones together, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to seek and a time to lose, a time to keep and a time to cast away, a time to tear and a time to sow, a time to keep silence and a time to speak, a time to love and a time to hate, a time for war and a time for peace. That's from the book of Ecclesiastes. All relationships exist for a season. Separation from friends and loved ones comes about due to death, or maybe because people simply move apart. These times can be very sad, but they need to be accepted because nothing can be done to restore the old relationship to what it once was. Eventually, a new relationship comes about. The new relationship doesn't replace the old one, but for a season, it gives our lives new meaning, richness, and challenges. I've often wondered what would have happened if all the possessions I had owned had been kept in a warehouse, something like the Room of Requirement in Harry Potter. But it's impossible. For all kinds of reasons, we are separated from possessions which we hold for a season. If I had held on to everything, I would have owned too much stuff. And holding on is the key here. We can hold on to relationships or possessions or circumstances with a tight grip. But when the season changes, when change comes about, we need to open our hands in order to let go. If our hand is opened, then our hand is also ready to receive the next thing that life has to offer. As long as our fists are closed, all that is new and relevant to our lives would remain unavailable to us. So letting go is essential. In February of 2016, my dearly loved little dog, Lady, died at 17 years and 3 months. I could even tell you the number of days and hours, but I won't. For some time, I felt wretched, and I felt as though I could never love another dog again. And for a dog lover, to think that they can't love another dog is a painful experience. I did many things to express my grief and to open my hand in order to let go of Lady. One of them was to care for a whippet, a beautiful dog called Zephyr, whose owner went on a holiday for 5 days. Zephyr was desolate. He refused to eat or play or relate to me and spent a night sleeping in his human companion's bed. Slowly he emerged. He ate a little and he slept at the end of my bed. It was his time to mourn, his season of mourning. On the 5th day, I took him to the airport in Hobart to collect his human companion. As soon as Zephyr saw Jane, he was transformed. We got home and he raced around the garden, throwing himself into the air in many shapely forms. His time to mourn had become his time to dance. And I realised then that my time to mourn Lady would one day become a time to dance. And that's what happened. In May of that year, a friend asked me if I would take another small dog into my life. She was a 12-year-old Pomeranian called Venus. I was a bit unsure, but if I didn't take her, she might have to be euthanized. So I said yes. My friend brought her around to my flat and placed her on my lap. It took me a nanosecond to fall in love with her. She didn't replace Lady, who remains precious to me until this very day, but she showed me I had the capacity to love many beings. After 3.5 months of happiness or non-wretchedness together, She died of a bad heart. I was again separated from a loved one, plunged into sorrow. But this time I knew the sorrow was not permanent and I could love again. A month after Venus's death, Joey and Lucy came into my life and are also dearly loved, this time with the sure knowledge that even this season will pass. Change and separation are not a tragedy. They are the natural process that life takes. And now we come to the last of the 5 remembrances. I inherit the results of my actions in mind, speech, and body. My actions are the ground on which I stand. Just over 40 years ago, when I lived in Canberra, I had a visit from an Adelaide friend who had, in fact, in different ways, abandoned me and our friendship, causing me great hurt. It took me 12 years after that to trust friendships fully again. However, I was willing to entertain a visit from this former friend. We had a reasonable time. At the end of the visit, my friend said that he had bought me a gift and would leave it for me so that I could collect it when I got home from university. I got back to my room in college expecting to see a book or an audio cassette left there for me. There was nothing there. What can you expect? I growled to myself. I then walked over to the college office to check my mailbox. Inside was a message that said, "Your present is at the college office desk." I went to the desk with a very low expectation, only to find that my friend had bought me a beautiful carpet square I had seen a few days before in a carpet shop. I was really taken by my response. I was so glad that I was wrong about my friend. I happily took responsibility for my own negative reaction when I didn't find a book or a cassette. I never liked my anger towards my friend. I did not want to hold my friend in contempt. In the first verses of the Dhammapada, which is a beautiful small scriptural text in the Theravadan tradition, but in the Vietnamese tradition, we also love it. It's called the Dhammapada, and the Buddha says in the first verses of that, mind precedes all mental states. Mind is their chief. They are all mind wrought. If with an impure mind, a person speaks or acts, suffering follows like the wheel that follows the foot of the ox. Mind precedes all mental states. Mind is their chief. They are all mind wrought. If with a pure mind a person speaks or acts, happiness follows like a never departing shadow. The fact of the matter, friends, is that I am responsible for my own thoughts, words, and actions. Nobody else. I have control over myself ultimately. I can't blame anyone else for my suffering, and this is a source of joy. Forgiveness is always possible if I cultivate a mind and a heart of loving kindness, understanding, joyfulness, and open-heartedness. I needn't live in a state of resentment and bitterness forever. I don't assume that this is easy, but if we create a heart and mind of resentment and bitterness, eventually, with effort and time, we can transform that heart and mind into one of understanding and open-heartedness. That, at least, is the challenge. My actions are the ground on which I stand is a reference to karma, or action, and vipaka, or the maturation of thoughts, words, and deeds. Sorry, my brother's home, so I'm expecting something to happen. Our thoughts, words, and deeds create the foundation of our lives. We choose how our lives go. No one else, not even the people who try to control us. If we accept this truth and act to create a wholesome life, a virtuous character, then our inheritance is of great wealth. It is within our own power to respond to all of our lives' challenges positively. A very healthy possibility, I would have thought. So There are other things I could say, but I'm not going to. I think I've said enough. My reflections that I've presented you with tonight are true for me, but the suffering they refer to is also true. The 5 remembrances point to our daily experience of the relative world. They are the historical world, the ordinary world that we live in. They are presented as a means by which we might deal with those aspects of life that present pain and suffering. How might I get ready to face the worst that can happen to me? This reflection of mine has, surprisingly to me, shown me that the realities of life are just that, realities of life, which in fact also bring benefit, meaning, understanding. They point to the ultimate truths of life. Based in this interpretation of the 5 remembrances, then, rather than just ask me questions or make statements about what you believe, I've got a reflective question to ask of you. Given these realities of life that we've been talking about, old age, sickness, death, separation from all that we love, and being responsible for our own minds and hearts, given those realities expressed in the 5 remembrances, I want you to think about and share tonight, how might I deliberately shape the life I live? How might I deliberately shape my life in relation to these 5 remembrances and the positive stance we can take to old age, sickness, death, separation, and our own responsibility. Thank you. If I've said anything you have no idea what I'm talking about, then you feel free to ask me. Or if you think it's a load of rubbish, then please say so. But it would be good to think about how we might live our lives, how we might practice the Buddha's teaching in a way that brings a positive response to the realities of life.
Thank you, Venerable. I think Bill has a question here.
Yeah. Maybe not so much a question, but as you was reading out the words from the Hebrew writings, it reminded me very much of a 1960s song by the Byrds, and Turn, Turn, Turn. In fact, It might have been an absolute copy of those words. I don't know the song precisely, but many of the things that you said were definitely in that song. A massive hit in the 1960s.
I think the Byrds pinched it straight from the Bible. That's what happened.
Yeah. And I happen to be the same age as yourself.
Ah.
So there's no doubt, my mind might be in my 20s, but my body is in my 70s. So I'm definitely getting older. And today, my wife and I went out for a walk, and I do have a sickness. I do have a fibrosis of the lung. So as I walk up the hills, I get a little bit breathless. So I say to myself, I take each step and say, thank you, Buddha. Thank you for, I'm alive. I can feel my body. Yeah. I'm living in the present.
Yep. So you're agreeing with me, Bill. It sounds like it.
Absolutely. And I'm enjoying it. I'm not scared of what's in the foreseeable future.
No.
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 I feel in a very good place.
You and me both, Bill. There you are.
Yeah. That's all I have to say. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Anyone else?
Thank you, Bill. We have a couple of comments from the chat. So Tina said, "Thank you, Tay. Such a beautiful sharing today." And Zen also shared that it's quite an amazing paradigm shift, accepting and making friends with suffering, old age, sickness, and death. Thanks for sharing that, Tay. That's something I will remember for a while.
Good. It is a paradigm shift. Even within Buddhism, people think that old age sickness, well, that's what the Buddha saw. He saw an old person, he saw a sick person, he saw a dead person, and he saw a monk. And he figured he had to do something about all of that. Because in the story of the Buddha's life, he hadn't encountered those things before. His father had protected him from those experiences. But when we live with them, when we come to it with the awakened mind that the Buddha eventually achieved, we see that they're not terrible. They're just life. It's just life, and we have to live with that in a way that's open-hearted and generous, and we have to live like that for the sake of other people too. In my tradition, the role of the bodhisattva is primary. So the bodhisattva practices in order to help others. And if we approach old age, sickness, and death with this attitude of open-heartedness and even joy, then we're going to help others as well. We are going to fulfill our bodhisattva vows, our bodhisattva stance on life. So it helps us and it helps everyone we come in touch with, I hope, I trust. Yes, Bill.
Very early on, you mentioned your brother, him asking you to assist him with euthanasia. What is the Buddhist approach to that?
Well, interestingly enough, I gave a talk to the Association of Engaged Buddhists on my own view of euthanasia. I, for myself, couldn't come at euthanasia. I wouldn't sign up for it myself. And my brother asked me to do it, and I said, I can't do that. I can't do that for you because you're my brother and I love you. I can't do that. And besides which, a Buddhist monk or nun is not supposed to encourage anyone to take their own life. However, I wouldn't, if somebody else if they made the decision for themselves and they considered it very deeply and in conjunction with the right kind of people, then they have to make that decision for themselves. I can't make the decision for them. And if there are consequences for that action, karmic consequences, well, they'll live those consequences through. But the interesting thing now, Bill, is that my brother has very recently been diagnosed with having pancreatic cancer, with an inoperable pancreatic cancer. And he's just now come home from a day surgery where they're looking at the lesions on his liver to see whether there's a relationship between the two types of cancer. There's a good chance he's got about 6 months to live. He said to me the other day, I've changed my mind about euthanasia. I want as much time with my wife as I can get.
Excellent.
And I thought, how interesting. When you're not really confronted with death, you can think about euthanasia. You can think about it from the point of view of this life is very challenging. This life is awful that I can't have what I want and do what I want. But when the moment comes that life is, you become aware that life is going to come to an end, you change your mind. He wants to hang on to all the time he can with his wife. And I don't blame him. You know, that's perfectly reasonable. Why would you want to give up before you have to the relationship that you have with the person you love most in the world? So it's just been interesting to me to see what has brought about a change in his approach to voluntary euthanasia.
Yeah, that's excellent.
It's interesting, that's for sure. I'm finding it interesting having, my brother is 7.5 years younger than me. And I've always told him all his life that I've loved him before he was born. And I still love my brother like that. So it's interesting to spend all this time with this person you love so much, who is going to die before you. One day he will not be in the world with me. And I have no idea what that's going to be like. It's a bit hard to imagine while he's still there, but I guess I'll find out when the time comes.
Yes.
Hopefully I and all the rest of us will be able to eventually open our hands and let go so that we can receive what life offers us now in this moment. But that's much easier to say than to do.
Yeah.
Easy to talk. It's easy to say all these clever Buddhist things, but it's another thing to actually do them. Anything else?
On that note of opening your hand to accept what life brings us, we have a comment relating to that from Sophia, who said, "Thank you for sharing, Tay. What you said about separation especially resonates with me. The image of opening our palms is a beautiful way to remember how we can live an open-hearted life." So that's a beautiful analogy.
Yeah. When I lived in Hobart, I worked a lot with people in palliative care. I worked a lot with people dying in the hospice or at home, and I conducted lots and lots of funerals, and more often than not for Buddhists, but I always say, I'm a Buddhist monk, but this is not a Buddhist funeral. This is a funeral for a good man or a good woman or a good person. And I would always use that image of opening the hand to let go and not keeping it tight. And it seemed to resonate with people, but it's in that context of conducting funerals and thinking about the lives of these people that I cared for, that it occurred to me, that it arose in my mind. Yeah. But who knows where good ideas come from? I have no idea. I think it's more like things like grace or something like that, freely given by the universe. I don't know. And Sophia probably knows that her name is Greek and means wisdom, what we would call in Vietnamese Bhatnya or Prajna, or Panya in Pali. So go, Sophia. Develop what your name means. And it sounds like you already are.
I think I have a lot of intellectual knowledge, but no wisdom yet.
You might be being too hard on yourself. Just be confident in your own Buddha nature, that's all. That you're a Buddha deep down, and perhaps not even so deep. Maybe it's much more obvious to others. Anything else before we dedicate the merit?
We have a comment from Sin. The title of your talk is 5 Remembrances of the Buddha. I suppose truly
Yep.
remembering the Buddha is to remind ourselves of this reality. Thank you for sharing, Tay.
Okay. If you want a copy of it, then you just need to, well, you can just put the 5 Remembrances into the Google search engine. But there's a very beautiful translation by Thich Nhat Hanh in their chanting book of the 5 Remembrances. But you could just put it into the Google search engine and see what you come up with. Yeah.
I had a question. Since we
Yes.
have a bit
Sorry.
of time left, I was wondering if, like, to a point that you said earlier, which is, I think in those moments when we just hear about a talk or learn about a concept, it's really fresh in our heads, and it's like we have these aha revelation moments, and it's like, I'm gonna remember this forever, and I'm never gonna, you know, like care about, like kind of go back to the old ways. But how can you bring these remembrances more into our daily lives? What's kind of your practice? I'm quite curious.
Well, I'm very human. So when I was a school teacher in Zimbabwe, I taught in Zimbabwe for 2 years. And in the first year of my teaching there, we had no running water or electricity in our house, in the school itself. So I used to have to take a bucket down and wash the dishes with the bucket of water, or carry up buckets of water, just like everybody else did. And then suddenly they put on the water in the first term of my second year there. And although everything leaked, there was still running water in the house. And I thought to myself, I will never take running water for granted again. However, when I got home to Australia and was used to running water, I didn't think about it anymore. So I think what we have to do is to build into our lives some kind of practice to remember the blessings of life or the lessons of life. And the obvious thing that we can do in this instance is to repeat these five remembrances every day to ourselves as part of our practice. You wake up in the morning, you might, I don't know what people do, but you might do 15 minutes of meditation, and then at the end you repeat the 5 remembrances. And don't go through them quickly. Allow them to sink into your own heart and mind. Allow them to really touch you deeply. And if you need to keep a journal with your responses, then that would be good too. Or you can get together with other people and see what they think. So it's just a case of doing it. You know, you might not do it every day, but you might do it 3 days a week, on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, or something like that. But just to repeat them and to reflect on them and to write about them and share in the little sanghas that you become part of about these things these things to remember that are part and parcel of life and part and parcel of the Buddha's teaching. And remember that when Prince Siddhartha was driven to leave his life as a rich young prince and seek out the answer to suffering, it was old age, sickness, and death that spurred him on. And then, of course, he left his wife, Yashodhara, and their little son, Rahula. So there was parting. The season of romantic love had come to an end. Now it was the season of searching. And then, of course, the last one is the realization that at the bottom of everything, both our joy and our sorrow, is our own mind and how we live with ourselves and with our own mind. So all of that is tied in basically to the Buddha's teaching. It's really, in some sense, what Buddhism is all about. How do we deal with the challenges that life presents us? And how do we deal with them on the basis of our own minds and hearts? Easy to say, not necessarily easy to do, but we do our best. That's the thing. We do have it. And the other thing too that's really important is not to try and do this stuff by yourself. If you have a sangha, a community of people practicing together, that's really important. That's helps sustain you. And of course, that's one of the 3 refuges that are proposed in Buddhism: to take refuge in the Buddha, to take refuge in what he teaches, and to take refuge in the Sangha, the community that practices what he teaches. That'll all help. That'll all help.
Thank you, Tay. They were very useful tips, actually. Repeating it every day, repeating it. Yeah, because it's very easy to forget, especially like with these practices that, and Sophia was right, how like we can learn things intellectually, but then when it comes to practice, it's very easy to forget. Does anyone have any questions? If not, I do. So,
did Les
Les,
put his hands together?
After you, Elise, please.
Oh, no, you can go.
Okay. Dear Ty, I was just thinking, as you mentioned, the not having running water. And it reminded me of another teaching of Venerable Thich Thong Phap, which I still think about every morning. And I think it has a great effect day to day. And that's his practice of the non-toothache. It sounds simple and ridiculous, but showing gratitude and giving thanks and appreciating that every day when you don't have a toothache, it is really something fabulous. You know, especially if you've known the pain of a toothache. And focusing on that every morning as you clean your teeth is a great way to start the day. Focusing on the positive things in your life, what you have, you know, the benefits that you have, and not negative things, which it's very easy to fall into.
There's a lovely little cartoon where Charlie Brown and Snoopy are sitting on a jetty and they're having a conversation. And one of them, I can't remember which, probably Snoopy says to Charlie Brown, or doesn't matter, you know, one day we're going to die. And the other says, that's true. But on all the other days, we're going to live. And I think that's the same kind of thing, you know. I've got a toothache today. But on all the other days you don't. You know. Yeah.
Thanks, Liz. And thank you, Tay. We have a comment from Sin Sin as well.
Yep.
He said, yes, Tay, I personally...
The other thing that comes to a colleague who is, sorry, what did you say?
Oh, I was going to read out a comment from Sin Sin.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, so he said that I personally feel the importance of community. This gathering is an example of that. I know that the support from spiritual friends is nurturing and very meaningful. Sorry to cut you off there.
No, that's fine. I have a colleague in Adelaide who is the rabbi. She's the only rabbi in Adelaide at the moment, but she's the rabbi of the liberal shul, the progressive synagogue. And I went to her synagogue for the services for Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, a couple of years ago. And the Day of Atonement is a day when you acknowledge the wrong that you have done over the last year, and you seek the forgiveness of people that you have caused wrong to. But she read a beautiful litany by a rabbi, an American rabbi, who talked about the good that I have done, and went through a whole list of things of things that I've achieved that are wholesome and good. And I thought, what a wonderful idea, rather than just sit around beating our breasts all the time and saying, I'm a rat bag, I'm a rat bag, I'm a total rat bag. Why not look at the things that we are doing really well, the things where we are, where we're giving expression to the love and the generosity and the wisdom and the patience in our lives. You know, we could look at Europe at the moment and think that it's all about, you know, mad Russian presidents destroying people. But there have been great moments where, say, Polish people or Estonian people have taken Ukrainian people into their homes and have loved them like their own children. Or they've gone as far as Ireland, where they're learning English. And you know, there are terrible things happening, but there are also some really wonderful things happening. You know, it's not all terrible, it's not all miserable. There's goodness in the world as well. And at times like this, that's when we might need to hold on to that goodness more tightly than we ever have done since any other horrible war that's happened in the last 2 million years. And yes, Sin, I agree absolutely with you. The absolute importance and significance of Sangha, of spiritual community, of spiritual friends. Anything else?
Oh, seems like no one else. I do have a question though, Tay, that you did mention about the practice of gratitude and forgiveness in one of your in a section of your talk. And what is your, like, I'm curious as to what is your experience of practicing gratitude and forgiveness? Because I guess, like, these practices, I guess we can have the intention to practice it, but it's it can't be forced. So do you have any tips on cultivating gratitude and forgiveness?
Yes, I do. And what I'd really love to do is to be able to go out and hold retreats around these things. But one of the things that I have done with people is to read together the what's called in Pali the Mahamangala Sutta, the text on what are the greatest blessings in life, and there the Buddha teaches what are the greatest blessings. Now, I think one of the brothers in the Plum Village tradition, Thich Thong Phap, he has just written a book on the 8 realizations of the Mahasattvas, the great beings, and in that there's also a lot of reference to those things that bring benefit, to those things that bring joy, and the Mahamangala Sutta is another text. And so what I've done in the past is to create a liturgy where I go through, for example, where we read together the Mahamangala Sutta, we offer incense, we bow to the Buddha, the Dharma and the Sangha, and then we read together Mahamangala Sutta. And then after that, we have a process that's called, in the Plum Village tradition, touching the earth. And I composed this for myself. It was to look at all of the those things that Abraham Maslow, the psychologist, came up with. What did he call them? Maybe someone can help me out here. I can't remember. I'm having trouble remembering because I'm 70 years of age.
Is it the hierarchy of needs?
That's the one. Thank you very much. So what I did was I went through each need in this hierarchy of needs, and I wrote exactly how they are met living in Australia. Every level of need. And then after the chanting of the Mahamangala Sutta, we stood there, and then I repeated the paragraph that I'd written based on each of these. I've forgotten them again. Gosh, the hierarchy of needs, how each need is met, and at the end of each verse, we all bowed, touched the earth, and it was a lovely thing to do. I used to do it by myself because I can so easily be overcome by misery or regret, or not regret. You know, when the world looks like it's too terrible for words, and I would at night stand in front of my Buddha image and do this practice to remind myself that in fact all of my needs are met in this life, in this country. And then to remember that we're very fortunate in this country because all of the means to meet these needs are met here. But that doesn't mean that in countries where those means are not available, that there's unhappiness at all. In fact, you know, in Australia, the rate of suicide is very high. The rate of depression is very high. So wherever we are in the world, there are things to be thankful for, and we can turn that into some form of practice. The other thing about forgiveness is that forgiveness is really about letting go. It's about acknowledging that someone didn't do for us in our lives what we would have preferred that they did. So now I need to let go. But I might need to express a lot of anger before that. Now, that doesn't mean to say I go around being angry at the person who hurt me, but it does mean that I find a friend who understands me and accepts me, and I talk about and give expression to the anger that arises when I think of what the person has done to me. I allow those feelings to come up. I don't hold on to those feelings. I let them arise and then they go. I let them arise and when I've done enough of that, then I can say, you know, I would have liked you to have done this, or I would have liked you to behave in that way, but you didn't, so I let go. And there's also a lovely meditation by Stephen Levine in his talks on suicide that is about forgiveness. So there's lots of resource around in Buddhism to help us practice forgiveness too. But like all things, I mean, in Buddhism we talk about practicing this, practicing that, which means that we might have to do it many times. We might have to do it a significant number of times to practice it. That's why we call it practice and not perfection, because we all through our lives are practicing letting go of all sorts of things. We're practicing being grateful because we can be so easily overwhelmed by our feelings of grief or resentment or that. So we just keep practicing all the time. There's no end to the amount of practice that we will need to do until one day there is an end. But in my life, that's not quite in sight yet. I'm a very ordinary person, it seemed to me. Is that helpful for me to have said those things?
Yeah, thank you, Tay. It's a really good reminder that it's practice, not perfection. And I think it's very helpful how you summarize forgiveness as letting go and to practice gratitude, to turn our attention into counting the blessings. Yeah. So on that note, we are, sorry, did I cut you off again?
No, that's okay. I'll just say that one of the things I've discovered in the last few years is that those people who have really hurt me are people I can be grateful to, because they have given me the opportunity to learn more about myself and about life. And there's when I was in the monastery, I was in a Trúc Lâm, in a bamboo forest monastery in near San Diego in California. And one of the novices, he used to go around every morning ringing the bell to tell us all that morning tea was ready. And he would always come up to me and he would say, Thich Thong Phap, there are a lot of bodhisattvas out there this morning. And what he meant was, there's a lot of grumpy old monks who are going to test your patience. And they are the very people you need in your life, those bodhisattvas who will force you to practice patience. And it was just a lovely way that young monk had of warning me that morning tea might not be as straightforward as I was hoping. But I need to be patient, and they need to be I need to see them as bodhisattvas teaching me about patience. Now, someone was going to say something else.
Yes, we have a comment from Sophie again. She said, Tay, thank you. You mentioned Stephen, Levine, and Thich Nhat Hanh. Are they other Zen teachers you'd recommend for us to learn more from if we're interested in the Zen tradition?
Well, yes and no. I mean, Stephen Levine never ever talked about himself as a Zen practitioner. He was much more influenced by the Theravadan tradition, I think. And Thich Nhat Hanh is a Zen master, or a meditation master, what's called in Vietnamese Tien Sư, a Zen teacher. But Thich Nhat Hanh also included in his teaching a lot of the teachings of Theravada Buddhism as well. So he created a school of Buddhism that was in fact very accessible to Westerners, using both a Zen approach and a Huayan approach and a Theravadan approach. There are all kinds of Zen approaches, like I've just finished a 9-month course with the New York Zen Centre for Contemplative Care, which is from a Soto Zen tradition, a Japanese Soto Zen tradition. And I had not had a lot to do with Soto Zen before. I'd had a little bit to do with it, but it was attractive to me. I thought there were a lot of lovely things in the teachings from that tradition. And I've experienced great transformation in myself in the last 9 months as a result of being part of this group of people. And my life has been changed by a Dharma talk by a woman Roshi in the Zen tradition, and she's very Zen. When we talk about Zen, you can never really talk about one thing. I mean, Vietnamese Zen and Korean Zen and Chinese Zen and Japanese Zen, they might all be called Zen or Tien in Vietnamese, or Chan in Chinese, or Sun in Korean. But they're not the same. They're not the same. They bring a different mood, a different culture to the practice of meditation. In the same way that even two forms of Theravada Buddhism are not the same. That's the Theravada Buddhism of Sri Lanka is different from the Theravada Buddhism of Thailand and Burma. And I think the Theravada Buddhism in Laos is also different. And even within the one country, the Theravada Buddhism of Buddhadasa Bhikkhu is different from the Theravada Buddhism of Ajahn Chah, for example. So in a way, those labels are not always that helpful. You just have to be open to whatever the teacher is offering, whatever that tradition is offering. And if it resonates with who you are as a person, then that's fine. If it doesn't, then that's fine too, you know.
Thank you, Tay.
I never thought I would be, oh, sorry.
Oh, no, it's okay.
I never thought that I would get involved in Zen, because what I knew about Zen in my 20s was all about Japanese Zen, and it just seemed too smart for words. And then I met Thich Nhat Hanh's teaching as a Zen master, and I found that I resonated with it. And it really shocked me. I thought, oh, I never thought I'd call myself a Zen man. And then a couple of years ago, I read that wonderful work by, my memory's failing me more and more. John Blofeld translated his work. How can I have forgotten his name? A Chinese Chan master. It doesn't matter. I read his book. I read this book translated by John Blofeld, who is an English person.
Not Master Sheng Yen? No?
Not Master Sheng Yen, no. Doesn't matter. Oh, how irritating. Anyway, I read just one portion of this book and realized that I understood more about Zen than I ever thought I did. So, you can never tell what's going to come along in your life. Perhaps if one more question, and then it might be time to have a cup of tea.
I'm just noting the time, it's past 8:30. Sorry, guys. So if anyone needs to leave now, they can. Otherwise, is there any last burning questions before we close off?
You can always write to me, and I can always attempt to answer your questions. I'm a very fallible human being, so I might not give you the right answers, but I'll give you the best ones I know.
So where do we write to?
Based on 70 years. Sorry?
So how do we communicate with you? By email.
Well, you can email me. You can email me if you want to. That would be nice. My email address, somebody's got it there. I know Les or Kotri have got it.
I can pass it on to you, Bill, or
yeah, if you want to.
Thank you.
So I can just give you my email address now here, and
Yeah, if you can post it in the chat. I think anyone who's interested. Perfect.
That's my email address. I don't have Tay's email address at the moment. I can't remember, but I can give it to you if you email it to me, Bill.
Okay.
What if I spell it out now?
Okay.
My email address is my name, Thong Phap, THONG all in lowercase, at y7mail, and 7 is the numeral, not the word, y7mail.com. So it's Thong Phap at y7mail.com.
Is that correct, Tay? I've just put it in the chat there. Just check the spelling.
Okay, let me have a look. Where is it? Now I have to put my glasses on. Thong Phap at y7mail. Yeah, that's perfect. Thank you very much. There we are.
Fabulous.
So shall we dedicate the merit?
Yes.
May the wholesome energy that we have generated here tonight and at any other time be for the benefit of all living beings. May all beings be well, may all beings be happy, may all beings be free from suffering, may all beings know peace, and joy and the causes of peace and joy. And may we all continue to walk the Buddha's path of truth and love together. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. There we are.
Thank you, Venerable.
Thank
Thank you, Tay, for the insightful talk and sharing. And thank you, everyone, for coming. I hope you guys gained lots from this session. And I hope to see you guys next week. Next week, we have Venerable Orlande Ananda Tara talking on the topic of mindfulness or mind full of things. So I hope you can join us next week. And thank you again, Tay, for all your wonderful sharings and insight. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for having me. Okay. Okay, good night.
Good night,
Take
everyone.
care.
Thank you, Tay. Thank you, everyone. Good night.
Yeah, thank you. That was a really great talk.